Uh, our next speaker really did us a great disservice. He has a phenomenal book called The Liberal War on Transparency, and he only brought one with him to show us, as opposed to having some that he would sign for us. He's a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute in the area of environmental policy. He's the author of two best-selling books besides this one called Red Hot Lies, How Global Warming Alarmists Use Threats, Fraud, and Deception to Keep You Misinformed. And he wrote The Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming and Environmentalism. As a result of his work, which is debunking global warming myths, Greenpeace has repeatedly targeted him. They steal his garbage on a weekly basis. They issue press releases announcing with whom he dines and include him in their field guide to climate criminals. It is my pleasure to introduce a climate criminal to our group here tonight, Chris Horner.
Thank you, Mallory. Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm a climate criminal. Welcome me. Hi, Chris. I've attended one of Mallory's meetings before. I know he's serious about the time, so at risk of not getting the shepherd's crook, I'm going to go right in to briefly elaborating on the Obama administration's remarkable campaign to hide what is legally the public record of what they're up to, their governance, as well as their coordination with the professional left. The moves that we've uncovered, and I detail some of them here, cross over, as you'll hear, to criminality. That's to say there wasn't much to that promiscuous vow that if you like your transparent government, you can keep it. And in fact, it's going to be the most transparent in history, as he said over and over and over again, even past the inauguration. Here's what we know that meant. They are going to diligently shovel out Bush documents to friends. Sometimes we showed same-day service. When it came to their governance, however, the legally required record that be kept of what they do, they had certain tricks up their sleeve to ensure that A, documents weren't created to begin with, B, if they were created, you were not to see them, and C, to systematically destroy certain classes of records in the off chance you would learn about them. Details to follow. Now, one trick you may have heard of was the false identity email account we discovered for former EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson. For purposes of certain federal correspondence and record keeping, she was Richard Windsor. This non-existent EPA employee managed to win 3 years in a row the award for Scholar of Ethics. Now, while I like my false identities to at least be up on the ethical nuances of what they're up to, this proved to be just the tip of the email iceberg, not only, but if merely because of the document production that litigation over this unlawful practice produced. And in fact, no, nobody ever did it, despite the talking point, everybody does it. Name one. No one ever did. I'm going to list a few other tactics we found, followed by a quick case study on one of the more serious examples, and then a quick discussion of what impact compelled transparency is having. First, widespread use of non-official email accounts for official business, Gmail, AOL, me.com, we found all of those. This obviously serves to hide certain discussions from disclosure. It also subjects them to possible destruction because they're under the sole control of an employee who, you have to recall, made the decision to begin with to work offline outside of the legally required account. For example, when then White House Deputy Chief of Staff Jim Messina moved over to AOL to strike his deals with industry to support Obamacare in return for what they got, he apparently decided that these were best not committed to the legally required historic record. We now know it was AOL. This is government-wide. One official we exposed lawyered up, quit, and has been producing very helpful documents revealing a broad network of correspondence by administration officials on private email accounts with academics, other left-wing activists, the media, and rent-seeking industry. We are only now getting started on these. We have found numerous senior appointees using email accounts of former employers for official correspondence while working for the government now. I now know that this is being streamed, so I'm going to leave details out because we're filing suit, save about a half a minute there. Not 25 seconds. Probably by the end of next week. But let's just say one of them is a czar. They're using left-wing pressure group computer servers, Al Gore's computer server. It's going to be very interesting, and this is unlawful. They're also collaborating via SharePoint, and which is permissible, except for the footnote, and even privately owned computer servers at private universities arranged, we've demonstrated, by the White House to correspond, to create records, and so on, but presumably free from the Freedom of Information Act. That is only because they assumed we were not going to discover it, because it turns out they're not searching either of these in response to FOIA requests or congressional information requests. I learned this just to show you my superior legal and investigative abilities from a drunk government employee who could not contain himself because he was sure that they were just so clever getting one over on all of us. Now, such tricks only hide what they're up to. They don't exempt them, and that's the important thing to know. Next up for exposure is the officials' use of text messaging as alternative to email, which is fine. It's provided to them, which correspondence must be preserved like email. Unfortunately, unlike with official email accounts, the appointees have created the ability to destroy them, or at least the government's copy. For example, Richard Windsor's replacement at EPA is Gina McCarthy. I learned that she was texting like a teenager to the point that she was allegedly called into the general counsel's office and told, "Stop texting, period. These texts you're sending, particularly about Congress, are going to blow up in all of our faces." So I asked for these messages on the 18 dates she testified before Congress. Gee, these people, I have to... Well, EPA claimed no records. Now, I established that over the 3-year period in question, she had sent or received 5,932 text messages, only on her EPA phone, provided only for EPA business. The odds of her not texting on the 18 specific dates we identified were 1 in 7.9 sextillion. I thought the word sext in there, this was during the Wiener, L'Affaire Wiener, would at least get some media coverage, but alas, no. Anyway, we have asked for the rest of the text messages. They also then claimed no records. DOJ then copped to the fact that EPA has destroyed all of them, including Richard Windsor's. That is, Gina McCarthy, in charge of the war on coal, has swept her tracks clean of an agenda of enormous public policy importance, a required robust regulatory record, subject to litigation, all obviously improper. In fact, on its face, a violation of the Criminal Code, Title 18. Through counsel at Department of Justice, Ms. McCarthy has said, to the best of her knowledge, each of the 5,932 text messages were personal on her EPA phone. Now, that's not plausible, of course, even if they were all to her dear friends at the Sierra Club or Aunt Sophie. That's not an excuse for destroying something that's not hers. It's ours. So we filed suit seeking to enjoin this demonstrated systematic destruction of federal records. Here's the impact. By making public what is legally public, we are exposing another administration whopper, the transparency one. We also show that very often what they tell the public and Congress is not what they're saying among themselves or to their allies. Second, this has provided fodder for pursuit by some in the media, congressional investigators, and inspectors general, with 3 IG inquiries so far from our revelations. Third, it's led to several resignations and derailed at least one high-profile Obama nominee, the proposed chairman of FERC. Also, others are in court with email exemplars that we have produced, from Mark Levin, the talk show host and lawyer, to 12 state attorneys general, including your own. We now hope that some court concludes that a particular administrative record has been so corrupted by these dealings, like working on unlawful private accounts offline or document destruction, that the agenda must be halted until questions about the fidelity or integrity of the record are sufficiently and definitively answered. So, all of this depends upon the kindness of strangers. So in response to the most common question, what can we do? You can support groups like ours, particularly ours, who are doing this, helping the president keep at least the campaign promise to be the most transparent administration ever. Thank you.
Okay, let's take some questions. Questions. Will it stick is the question.
Sometimes. Because, again, the thing about correspondence is there's always someone on the other end. That's how we know that while the White House wasn't subject to congressional investigators threatening a subpoena, private industry did release, their lawyers told them you should cough these records up. That's how we know Jim Messina was using AOL. You can only destroy records so well, as we know, so even though they've destroyed the government's copy of these text messages, we're hoping to find out. We're always hoping the NSA will be there, for example. We have, in fact, FOIA'd Lisa Jackson's Verizon.net metadata, because they're destroying all metadata even at EPA, but NSA, so it's a matter of public record, has maintained that for Verizon customers, and it turns out she was using Lisa P. Jackson at Verizon.net for official business too, among several others. So that's a long way of saying, in some cases it will, But again, their typical response is they'll quit because we have less leverage over them. But then they do, when they're asked for a transcribed interview, begin to cooperate if you have somebody with a gavel asking the questions. Or it could be a judge, it could be a chairman in the House.
Next question. Is there another? The lady right over there.
Is there any hope of holding these people accountable as long as Eric Holder is in office?
You answered the question. Normally it's, well, at least we have the Department of Justice for this. Pause, wait for laughter. It's been DOJ who have admitted to us in several cases at NASA, at EPA, apparently facially criminal behavior, admitted it as an excuse for not producing records. Not in any, and now we're on this, Cluzo. It's an excuse for not producing records, and then they move on. Now, Your Honor, would we dismiss this? So DOJ is not going to do its job on this, but that's why I say it's up to the, in essence, though not technically, the private attorneys general here. And at least in 12 states, we've now got other attorneys general using what we have produced. So they quit, and we'll see what other accountability comes.
Time for one last question. There was a hand up over there.
Sir.
Let's get a microphone because it is screened out. Microphone's coming.
Is this new to the presidency, or have other administrations done it before? It sounds like something so easy to do, you'd figure it was a common practice.
Right. Part of it is that times change, and when a discussion used to take place by walking down the hall and sticking your head in the door, you no longer do that. You send a message. Well, the best way to not create a record is to not create a record. They chose to. Sometimes they choose to do it unlawfully, but that doesn't make it, doing it on private resources doesn't make it any less public. There's no evidence that anybody else did it. The only example ever thrown out is Carl Rove used an RNC account to conduct RNC business, which was permitted a certain percentage of his job, for correspondence that if he would have conducted on his White House account, it really would have hit the fan. So that's the only thing. Until there's some evidence, that's just a talking point when it's used.
Website.
CEI.org. Chris Horner online.
And next time, if you're going to come back, bring some books with you.
They don't fit in the overhead compartment or underneath the seat in front of me. So.
Thank you.